forgot to introduce myself for those of you who joined us a little bit later. My name is Karen Reynes. I'm the Executive Director for NAMI Central Texas. We are the local affiliate of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, offering all kinds of free programming for both individuals and families living with mental illness, as well as all kinds of great programming at no cost to the larger community. I'm so excited today to welcome Rachel Seifert, who will be talking about life transitions, trauma, grief, anxiety, and depression. It's a great honor to welcome you to Rachel to these weekly sessions that we've been doing. I'm looking forward to listening to what you have to share with us about this particular and important topic during this time. Rachel, I turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Karen. I'm going to go ahead and share the PowerPoint here so everyone can see it. And just a little bit about me. I am currently the clinical director at Sage Recovery and Wellness Center. Our outpatient services are in Westlake, and then we have a residential 15-bed residential boutique style center in Manor, and we also have an executive track for people who want to continue to work while also getting help from recovering from any addiction, whether it's process or chemical addiction. And then I also have a private practice on the side here in Austin, and I've been in mental health about 15 years. I've tried to work with all kinds of people, all kinds of populations. I love what I do. I think the most walking with people through life. So I'm very passionate about people and being with people in their pain, in their recovery, in their life transitions. So this is a PowerPoint I created based off of something I'm passionate about, and it's life transitions. I'm passionate about it because we all experience them, and I don't think that sometimes they get the space that they're due or the honor that they're due. I think that trauma comes from them, anxiety, depression, grief, and it's looked past sometimes or blown off. And so I'm going to share a little bit about what I have found with life transitions through my work and research. So first thing first here. So what is a life transition? One of the things that we hear a lot about is the midlife crisis. And some people think that's a myth. Some people have experienced a midlife crisis. So it's a life transition is a very common psychological term. It's in the textbooks. It's thrown around a lot, and it can be something really small or it can be something really big. But in general, it's this process of something changing. And developmentally within the lifespan, we go through those naturally. A baby is born, and then they learn to walk, and then they learn to run, and so on and so forth, right? And then when you go from middle school to high school and you get a driver's license, or then you go from high school to maybe you go to college, maybe you go to trade school, maybe you get a job. All these are transitions along the way that both culturally there's an expectation around, familially there's an expectation around, and naturally, the human is kind of drawn to different things and transitions. So the process of life transition theory, it includes points of crisis, and it talks about that there's always increased stress. So right off the bat, life transition is associated with stress. And if I could see everyone's face here, I would probably think that most of you could agree. So in the literature, stress is named up front. Also, what's named up front a lot is change. And we all know too, as humans, that we are drawn towards comfort. That's the human spirit. And life transitions require a lot of change. So automatically, here we are with just living our life, and we're going through these naturally and choosing them, and we're going through them against our will, right? Against our choice, depending on what the life transition is, and automatically there is this stress and there's this change, and we want to resist potentially. So one of the things that I'd like to add, though, is that life events, as stressful or not, as we make them. So I think that during a time of life transition, when we have stress and change, we want to reach for control, because we're humans, and so we want to reach for control. And I love the piece in here that talks about we get to decide. Part of a life transition, there is a piece we can control, and it's what we do with it, right? There are pieces within it, how we react to something, what, a choice we make, how we use it for growth. So we get some control here. It's good to know about these perspectives on life transitions, because they show us that there's nothing inherently bad about change. And I wish I could see your faces right now, because I think that there's nothing inherently bad about change. It's kind of funny. I think that a lot of us think there is something bad about change, and we don't want it. Even if it's a great change. Clearly we don't want the changes, right, that feel hurtful or sad or hard, but so there are a variety of factors there. And we've got, there's no doubt that you've seen stuff in your own neighborhood. People have gone through a traumatic change, like a tornado, right? So these are the common ones, like the tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, fires, that causes damage. So although we've suffered a loss, we can clean it up and we can move forward. And I think that speaks to the control piece. This I thought was really interesting, and I hope you do too. Of all the life changes, people remember moving the most. So of all the life changes people go through, moving for your home was the one that stood out the most as the most significant or memorable life change. And it stays with you through your whole life. And so I'm wondering, as you hear this, reflecting on your life, depending on whatever age or stage you are at, if a move has been significant, for you, and if that was a real life transition for you, no matter the age or stage. And I think those are important to note around this specific life transition, because, not only developmentally are you possibly going through puberty, but you're also now at a new school, or your parent died, or you had a sibling who died, or you had your first kiss, or something really embarrassing happened in your life. And so it's like, not only did you have a really big life transition, like moving, but you were developmentally also carrying just a natural stage of life with you. So how can change be beneficial? And I think this is a great question to ask throughout life, because one of the things we do not get to escape is change. And so certain changes, like entering school, starting a new job, starting a family, can be exciting. Or maybe that the culture that you're in sees them as exciting, or they're supposed to be. Maybe someone significant in your life thinks that it's exciting, but you're not so sure. And then many people look forward to some of these, and feel that if they don't meet these marks, they are not on the right track, or there's a lot of disappointment. And I think that disappointment is part of grief. And so just so that's mentioned, that's not left out. And changes, especially difficult ones, can influence personal growth. And, as a counselor, and being on the side in the counselor role, I love when clients want to grow, and when they can use a life transition for their own growth and happiness and fulfillment. But as a client, when I'm on the client side, personal growth can be really hard, because of what it, not only the feelings that it, not only the trauma or the stress or the grief or the anger or the disappointment it brings up, in the fact that I have to feel those things, but just what it means for my life and what meanings I can put on that. And so it's really tough. And so change brings about these things. So we can encourage the development of skills or knowledge, and might also bring about greater awareness of a condition or a group. For example, the family of a person diagnosed with schizophrenia might become more aware of mental health conditions and their effects, or the parents of a child who comes out as gay might become interested in LGBTQIA issues and equal rights, right? So there are things that come out of life transitions or change that could really open up a whole new path in your life. And that is so powerful as far as like purpose and fulfillment and meaning. And so change isn't all bad, right? The stress, anxiety, grief, depression, trauma, and because life or change can cause stress, it can have an effect on one's daily life. And this piece is really important. A person facing a big change might, for example, experience depression, anxiety, grief, headaches, trouble sleeping, eating well. Then people get into using drugs and alcohol, maybe abusing, maybe addiction. So, I think we all can be honest and say human beings don't like pain and we want to get away from that. So what can I do to get away from my pain? Even though pain and change and transition and grief and depression and anxiety and stress and trauma hold so many gifts. It's like, no, I'm not gonna explore that. I want to do, I want to do drugs. I want to do alcohol. I want to eat. I want to escape. I want to game. I want to look at pornography more. I want to read more. We could probably, you guys could help me build a really strong list of all the ways we escape. And so, I think this puts us at a fork, right, in the road of how long do I want to put off my grief, or how long do I want to sort of deny my depression if I even know I have it, or how much, anxiety can I live with, and when do I want to get help? How much stress can I manage before I'll start looking at the gifts of it, and I'll start managing the escapism. And so one of the resources I like to use for this is a TED Talk by Kelly McGonigal. It's How to Make Stress Your Friend. And my guess is that some of you have seen this and some of you haven't. It's usually a mix. It's really great. She is a research medical psychologist, and her research is over, a period of time. I think it's 10 years, and I won't, give it away. It's really worth watching. And her bottom line is that she used to tell all of her clients that stress was horrible. And what she realized, that stress wasn't horrible, and that you can use it to, you can work with it and use it to make your life better. And she researches in there how it can increase the longevity of your life if you can figure out how to go with stress and make it your friend versus being so resistant and opposed to what it brings. Dialectical behavior therapy, DBT. We use this. This is a foundation for us here at Sage, and it is really powerful. And I know it has jumped so much from, CBT being so big and now DBT. But DBT is great for mindfulness. For those of you that know it or have used it, that. And for those of you that haven't, I would really encourage you to look into it. It talks about things like radical acceptance, which is powerful when you're going through a life transition. And It talks about mindfulness and how to stay present. And those are really powerful tools when your body or your mind or your heart are sort of taking you in all the other directions because of the life transition and the things it's bringing up. So Insight Timer and Headspace are two great apps. There are others. I like Insight Timer personally. I recommend it to clients, and I use it personally and friends. I think it's very easy to use. It's very searchable. It has lots of different topics. It deals with sleep, meditation, anxiety, and you can do short guided meditations like for 5 minutes, which I think is powerful when you have 5 minutes and you really need it. Or you can step out of your office and be gone for 5 minutes and maybe your boss won't notice. Or if you need it, if you're going through a divorce and you're in court and you get a break, you can step out and do one of these. And then any mindfulness practice, that's a really thrown around broad phrase right now. So I would love to hear from you guys when we get to that place. Any mindful practices that you feel like have been useful and helpful to you that you would recommend. I'm always looking for new ones that people feel they connect with. So this is something that I have created, and I don't know that it's been coined by anyone or not. I don't think it has. It's this idea of micro life transitions and macro. So micro life transitions would be things that are extremely small. And one of the examples I like to use for this is maybe you didn't get that raise at work or that promotion, or you didn't get that job you were looking forward to, excited about, that maybe no one knew that you were excited about, or no one knew you interviewed for it, or maybe just a significant person in your life did. It's those things in your life that we might blow off pretty quickly, or we think that they are not allowed space to be sad about or be disappointed in or feel grief on. It's those things that happen day in and day out or week to week. And I think these happen a lot. And my passion around it is that they build up. So if you didn't get the promotion at work and then someone cut you off on the way home, and then, your car got broken into, and then your computer broke, it's anything that causes trauma, grief, disappointment, stress for you. I think they build up. And so, and part of why they build up is because we just blow them off, or we don't think that they're a big deal, or we're trying to get over it, or our significant other doesn't think they're a big deal, or we have, a job and kids and a partner and a social life, and it's hard to manage all of it. And so you don't even want to make the time for it or give it the time. And then what happens is a mainstream conventional life transition happens. Like your child moves out of the house and now you're an empty nester, or you go through a divorce, or you get married, or you have a child, or you get diagnosed with a mental health issue. And so all of a sudden you had all these micro life transitions happen, and then you have a big one. And then you're depressed, or you're anxious, or you can't sleep, or you're having some type of traumatic, trauma symptoms. And it's like, I don't understand how I got here. And I don't understand why the fact that like my kid went to college is such a big deal. I mean, it's a big deal, but why is it such a big deal? Why can't I get out of bed? Or why am I drinking so much every night? And it's like, then maybe you go to counseling. Hopefully you go to counseling. And you come in and you say, I don't know how I got here. I don't feel like myself. I'm not sleeping good. I've gained 20 pounds. I've lost 20 pounds. I'm suicidal. I'm exhausted. And then we start reflecting back. And I'm not talking about childhood back, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, tell me about the last year. Tell me about your last year. And all of a sudden we've got 3 or 4 micro life transitions that happened. And then we've got this big one that sort of broke the camel's back. And then the macro ones are what you can guess, right? COVID-19, a pandemic, and a president or a political climate that makes you anxious, war, or just issues between countries, threats about a country bombing us or being unhappy with us, weather, like hurricane, earthquakes, I mean, depending on where you live, right? So those macro, those really big ones, then also can play into it. I see clients that are really anxious about our culture, and that feeds into their day-to-day life. And so because a macro transition is going on, now they're afraid to leave their house. Well, that is like a macro affecting micros, right? And affecting everything in between, and just your day-to-day life of going to the grocery store, right? We're all dealing with these things right now with the pandemic. And I think this is a great time to sort of open up some of that. And I'd obviously love to hear from you guys on that. But this is a really macro life transition that we were forced into. And I don't know one person that would really stand up and say, yeah, I love it. I've had clients say, I can see benefits to it. I like not having to rush to work. I like not having to sit in traffic. I kind of like this work from home thing. Maybe I could do it more. But I don't think anyone's standing up and saying, this is amazing, and I hope it stays that way. And I would totally sign up for this next year. And so we were forced into this, and that brings in trauma. I read a definition of trauma last week, and it was so simple and so powerful to me, and I hope it is to you, but the definition was literally too much, too fast. And if that's not exactly what we have experienced as Texans, as Americans, as human beings on planet Earth, however big or small you want to, include yourself in, this was too much, too fast. And there was so much unknown to it. And that unknown is like the opposite of what humans like. So we got forced into something, right? Against our will, so to speak. And then it was too much, too fast. So that's trauma. And then all this unknown brings up anxiety, because unknown is very anxiety provoking. And so here we are already totally, out of our control. Well, that's a macro. Then people want to get married. People are having babies. People are getting divorced, right? Kids are, graduating, prom. I mean, we could build a hefty list. And then let's talk about, people are getting laid off, and people are losing their homes. People are losing their sense of sanity, right? People can't afford, their lifestyle that they did have. They're anxious. And then we have those little things, right? Like, oh, my partner, I had a fight with my partner today. And I think that falls under micro. I think that it's the things that sort of disrupt your day and bother you too. And so here we are, and we're all having to function every day in some form of this. So I'd love to hear from you guys too on what are some examples for you of how you've kind of interpreted the micro life transition. And just, if you're willing to share that at some point today. I think we've gone through this a little bit, how we would define these things. I put these definitions in here not because we don't all know them or live them, but I think they're powerful to look at and to revisit, just like the definition of trauma. So anxiety, distress, or uneasiness of the mind caused by fear of danger or misfortune. Well, if that's not pandemic COVID-19, I don't know, what would be. Depression, feelings of severe despondency or dejection. I think that we're going to see a lot of depression, potentially, kind of after we get some knowns to this. It's like that aftermath piece, right? It's that release of what we just went through. And then grief of whatever was lost. People have lost their businesses. I don't know that those are going to be able to just be reopened up tomorrow, right? People have lost things. Lives, like our lives have permanently changed or transitioned because of this. So for depression and understanding it and just seeing it how it affects our day-to-day life, I recommend the Black Dog video. And that sounds really silly, but if you literally just Google Black Dog video, it comes up. And one of the things I think that gets left out of talking about depression a lot is people talk about their exhaustion. The exhaustion, though, is from the weight that depression gives you to carry. Like there's just such a weight to depression that is exhausting. And I don't know, like that's not on a symptom, that's not on a criteria list that I've gone through with clients when I'm surveying for suicide or depression. It doesn't say like emotional weight. But personally, I think it should in some form. I think that, anyways, this video speaks to that a lot. Some of you guys may know David Kessler. He's a huge guru on grief, and he personally lost his son, and he has become a really big guru on grief. And he worked with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who is the kind of guru, the number one guru of all the research on grief and loss. And then grief yoga, for those of you who like yoga, I didn't know or are open to trying it. Grief yoga is a thing, and it's a mix of moving your body while also kind of going into some trauma or grief. And you move your body in a way that like helps you release those things you're carrying. So you might want to look into that if you feel drawn to it. There's a TED Talk called We Don't Move On from Grief, We Move Forward with It. And I like this because a lot of people want to say that, oh, we should get over this grief or move on. There's all these sort of, I think they end up being negative comments, right? Or ways of helping. Not malicious, but around how to talk to people about grief. And so I think that figuring out how to move forward with it and integrate it could be really helpful for some. Looking at your suicide risk, I don't know a lot of people who want to sit around and think about this, but it's really important because if it's subconscious, then you could be drinking a couple of bottles of wine without realizing that there's this internal, piece of you that doesn't want to be on earth anymore because of the pain or the stress or the anxiety, And so I think it's important to really at least look at, ask yourself that and, with yourself. You don't have to share it on Facebook, but be very real with where am I at? Like, I'm pretty sure that I want to move to Australia, or I'm pretty sure I want to like get away from this. I want to hide. Those are things that are important. And levels of care, right? For those of us that work in mental health, we know what this means more, but for people who don't, there are levels to getting help. Not everyone goes into the lockdown psych, like in a movie, right? That's really not even real. It's that, there's levels of care, and you could just go see a counselor to start, right? And that's very much not as scary necessarily as something like going inpatient would be, or even going into like an outpatient intensive program would be, or a group where you feel like you've got to share things that you feel shame about or fear of judgment around. And so just know that there are lots of levels and ways to get help. We have some support groups here at Sage that are just support groups. They're an hour and a half and they're on Zoom. And, you know, I hope clients, but I also have heard feedback, clients walk away feeling supported. They feel better. And so maybe for you, just a support group once a week would be a great place to start, to feel less isolated right now, less alone, less anxious about what the hell's going on. Pardon my language, but, and then coping skills. There is a big passion for me around coping skills because over my career in mental health, one of the things I've seen is that people don't always grow up learning coping skills. You know, I don't know that a lot of parents sit down with their kids and say, okay, I'm going to teach you some coping skills, but then indirectly, you know, sometimes we learn coping skills in our families or our homes growing up, or in whatever environment you grew up in, that maybe it helped you cope, but it's doesn't work long. It's not working for you anymore. Or maybe it helped you cope, but it was dangerous to you or detrimental to you or toxic to you. Or maybe you didn't learn to cope and now just leaving the earth sounds like a pretty good deal. You know, I've seen that when I've evaluated clients in the emergency room. It's like they're so stressed out that they just want to die. Well, it's like, do they really want to die, or do they just need some intervention as far as coping skills go, because they never learned them? And so maybe evaluate that and look at that and talk to yourself or talk to a counselor or a friend or, you know, anyone. And if you're a parent or if you're in a parental role, you might look at that as far as, you know, the people that you're parenting or mentoring or caregiving. But coping skills are so huge because of the micro life transitions, and then entering into the mainstream ones, and then the micros, right? It plays out now in the bigger picture. So what not to do with life transitions. So I talk about this because it's helpful, right? If you don't know what to do, it's helpful to know what not to do. And we all seek external affirmation. It's really natural, especially if you're an extrovert. But that can get kind of crazy, and because then everyone has an opinion and everyone's telling you what to do or how to handle something, and you lose sight of your own voice or your own intuition or your own path or desire, or however you want to name it, your own spiritual, you know, your own spirituality, or whatever you call it. And also, we can do this thing where we get really focused, right? And we kind of lose sight. We get that peripheral vision, and we lose sight of what's going on. It's those blinders. People call the blinders, right? Also, I think that feeds into the kind of the extreme independence, right? We naturally want to isolate sometimes with life transitions, regardless of micro, mainstream, or macro, right? There's shame, there's guilt, there's fear. There's sometimes that mentality of like every man for themselves. Like, I know that I think, you know, COVID-19 has brought that up. Like, well, I'm going to the grocery store and I'm going to panic buy everything. And, you know, I mean, the toilet paper craze was like a really good example. You know, there were stories about people fighting over a package of toilet paper, and it's that lone wolf, extreme independence. I can do this, or I'm so overwhelmed and I'm going to be frozen in this by myself. So asking for assistance or help or friendship for someone to be in it with you gets even harder. So inertia, you do nothing, you freeze. I bet there's a percentage in the group that does this, right? I think it has to do with being overwhelmed, but anxiety also freezes our brain. It freezes us from problem solving. It freezes us from being creative in any way. And I don't mean painting. I mean, like, how can I think outside of the box and solve the problem that I'm unemployed right now? You know, so we do nothing and we just kind of check out. So be careful of that. We go to control, which we've already talked about today. And whether we realize we go to this or we don't, we're going to it. This is what we do. And there are things we can't control, but there are things we can. And sort of figuring out what those are. And I like this quote. It's that 10% of life is what happens and 90% is how we respond to it. And if I or you or we could all keep that in mind, I think it would help with all the unknown going on, and just our own anxiety of, what can I do today to respond to this in a way that feels safe for me, where I feel contained and I feel connected. So, and then premature decisions. I like this one because I think it speaks to impulsivity. When we're anxious or uncomfortable, we want to get out of that, whether we are conscious of that or not. And so we will do whatever we can to get out of that. And that can come with being impulsive, or making a premature decision, which is, you haven't really thought through it. You just need to act because you need something to be different. You need to feel different. You need your immediate environment to be different. You need your world to be different, and your circumstances, whatever. And so you're just going to act without really processing what's going on. So how to make the most of a life transition. Some of these things we've talked about. So recognize that transitions are hard because they shake your sense of identity. I had a client who was having an identity crisis, and not only was her sense of identity being shook, but then she had COVID-19 pandemic to deal with. And so there's so many layers, right? And this is complex. And one of the beautiful things about the human spirit is how complex we are. And it's really complicated as well when there's a transition going on. So we define ourselves by our environments, by these changes, by these transitions, whether it's I should be at this point in my life and I'm not, or this shouldn't be happening to me, or this makes me less than because it did happen to me. I have worked in a lot of HIV and AIDS and STD education. If someone gets diagnosed with herpes, it's like I'm less than, I'm a less than person because I have herpes, or, and it challenges us on so many levels. So rebuilding your new identity, like your new role, your kind of new self. And I think that's one of the beauties of COVID-19 too, is what did you learn about yourself from working from home? Or what did you learn about yourself when you got laid off? Or what did you learn about yourself when it was challenged if you were going to be able to pay your bills? Or what did you learn about getting to sleep in later? What did you learn? And what did you learn about how you cope? And do you like this about yourself, and do you want to take it on, or do you want to kind of ditch that deal and find something else you like better? So it's exciting. There's excitement to embracing new pieces of yourself you've uncovered, or new roles that you're going to be in, or new path. So yeah, new habits. I like that word because we talk about that a lot, I think, in the United States, for sure, of habits and getting into better habits, or it's a bad habit. And so it's like, what habits have you noticed that you like? What new habits have you developed, or which ones did you let go of and you're kind of glad you did, or which ones have you developed that you might need to drop? Remind yourself why you chose to make this change. Well, with pandemic 19, we didn't choose to make this change. I think this speaks to some of the others, though. Why did you choose to get that divorce? Why did you choose to get married? Why did you choose to move to a different state? Why did you choose to get a new car? Because it takes you back to the core of this, right? Amidst the stress, anxiety, fear, trauma it's causing, like you made this choice for a reason, and like revisit that and honor that and know that you're honoring it, and see it as the big picture instead of kind of being lost within anxiety, depression, grief, trauma. stress, which, because I think they're very easy to get lost in, and recalling other times in your life when you successfully dealt with transitions. So one of the things I like to ask my clients is, tell me about a time in your life when you got through something really hard. And it's like, some clients are like, oh yeah, like I did get through the fact that my mom died of alcoholism when I was 10. And so then they sort of remember like their resiliency, or they remember their strength, or they remember a part of who they are that helps them feel connected to themselves to now take on this new transition. And looking at what helped you get through that, like what helped you get through your mom's death at 10. What'd you do? Did you talk to your friend about it? Did you ride your bike all the time? Having a support system helps you feel secure in transitions. And I think this can easily get dismissed. Like I feel like I hear this so much in my young life. And, you know, be connected. People live longer when they're more connected. Connect, reach out to somebody, reach for help, reach for a friend, tell anyone, you know. But when you're stressed or overwhelmed or depressed, that's like the last thing you can do. So what do we do with that? You know, what do we do with something that's inherently hard to do when you really need to do it? And I would challenge myself and everyone to make the smallest step you can. You know, make the smallest step. Maybe it's a text. Maybe it's a phone call. Maybe it's just saying hi to your neighbor when you go take your trash out. Maybe it's just taking the smallest step. Maybe it's going to the grocery store and talking to the person next to you. But I would challenge all of us to take the smallest step we can at a time when we need it the very most, whether that's a stranger, you know, sometimes talking to strangers is easier. And maybe it's a family member, a friend, a child, coworkers, your therapist, you know, anyone, the mail lady. I talked to my mail lady. It started out, I started talking to her out of frustration about my neighbor, but I talk to her now. So now we talked about COVID-19 last time I saw her, you know, and that's just a fun connection for me. And it's not one I engage in very often, but it helps me feel connected, right? I feel connected to my neighborhood. I feel connected to, you know, my mail, which that sounds silly, but you know, I feel connected to my mail lady now, and I don't even talk to her that often. So it's those little things too, that those micro interactions that can build up. So if you've had 3 micro interactions today, they'll help you feel more connected to your world. And that lowers stress, that lowers anxiety. Let me look at the time here. Okay. Be present, derive joy in little moments. I love derive joy in little moments. You know, this is stop and smell literally stop and smell the rose. Like when you literally see a rose plant, stop and smell that. On my walk a couple of days ago, I saw a lizard that had made a hole and it had eggs in it. And I loved that. I like nature, but I love just those moments around me, right? Where life is happening and I can be a part of it if I am just present and pay attention and kind of get out of my own head with my own worry. One step at a time. The addiction community and recovery community talk about this a lot, but it's very real. And I like to take it back to like, hey, how about 1 second at a time? How about 1 minute at a time today? Look at your strengths. Like we've all got them, whether you feel like you don't know what they are, or you feel like they're hard to find, or maybe you could give me a list right now. You've got strengths and they make you resilient. And your values make you resilient, whether it's a spiritual connection, whether it's a value of education, whether it's a value of exercise or self-care. Like you've got values. What are they? You've got strengths. What are they? Those will help you feel motivated and resilient and stronger. Simple self-care routines, right? Self-care is so thrown around right now, which I love, but it's like, what does that really mean? Well, it can mean a lot. Like the examples I've given here, sleeping 8 hours if you can. Hell, sleep 4 to 6 hours if you can, right? Maybe that pizza sounds great today, but maybe a salad would feel great for 3 days. Kind of looking past like immediately what's going on and looking at what would feel good for you. Maybe going on a walk would help you feel good for 3 days. So making choices that are really simple day to day, maybe just start with one choice, you know, and eating lighter. I love the eating lighter one. Because I don't think we would necessarily think about that. Sense of humor. I love this. It's medicine for life, right? It's getting through life. You've got to look at the fact that some of this is just feels super out there, and it's, you know, it feels like a different world. Like I like to make the joke that, am I on candid camera? Like, is there a camera that's about to pop out and tell me this is all a joke? So remember that. Be playful. Play, whatever that means, which that's like kind of a separate webinar. But okay, radical acceptance. Change is natural, right? This change is hard, but change happens. It's the human experience. And consider the changes that happen in nature, right? From when the sun rises to the sun sets, like that's just a natural change that happens, right? The stages of life naturally happen, birth to death. Like change is just life. Here's some books, some additional resources. You know, Passages is an old book, but I really like it because I think it speaks to some of those kind of just developmental ones. When Bad Things Happen to Good People is great. It's got like a Judaism taste to it, but it's very powerful as just far as that, you know, because I think this is a great question to ask when you have grief or in a transition. Man's Search for Meaning, The Alchemist. These are all about, you know, redefining yourself, finding meaning, being resilient. So thank you so much for being with me and just even contemplating what a life transition is and what this means to you. I'm looking forward to whatever questions you have, and I will open it up.
Rachel, you do have a few questions in the Q&A box.
Okay.
Do you see that little?
I do, yes.
Okay, awesome.
Okay. My 12-year-old is really depressed right now. Not seeing her normal friends is starting to get to her, even though she has email. It is not the same. What can I do to help her? She cries all day. I have taken her to her PCP, but anything else? Yeah, I think this is a great question. And I think that adolescents from middle school to high school, even probably late elementary, are kind of running into this. I'm wondering if there are any neighbors that that you guys could be around, even if it's at a distance. Like, could they ride bikes? Could they just talk? Could they? I'm wondering if, I don't know if you've said it says she's email. She has email. Maybe calling them, and maybe FaceTiming, some type of. I would try to think of some way to get her connected in like a face-to-face way to people that she cares about, and maybe letting her know a deadline of like, well, hopefully this is, you know, I mean, we don't know when this is going to end, but hopefully, you know, maybe in a couple weeks, like 2 weeks, we'll be able to go to one of your friends' houses and stand in the front yard and talk to them. You know, maybe giving her some type of a deadline or a time to reevaluate it would be helpful. So it's not just this kind of overarching loss that's never going to end. I hope that's helpful. There are some, Girl Talk is a resource that has more support groups. You know, we at Sage, we see adolescents, but it's more for like mental health or addiction. But I think Girl Talk does have it's a resource here in Austin that has some support groups. And I know that might feel kind of extreme, but it might help her be connected to a group of girls around her age, maybe through Zoom, or I'm just assuming they're using Zoom, but I don't know that for sure. So I hope that helps in some way. Please feel free to email me if you want to talk about that more. The next one is, how do you thoughtfully empathize and support someone struggling from loss of something like their routine without falling into a trap of comparing to those who have experienced this? So how do you thoughtfully empathize and support someone struggling from loss, like their routine, without falling into a trap of comparing to those who have experienced death or total income job loss? I'm not sure I totally understand the question. However, I think that part of empathizing and supporting someone struggling from loss is just being with them. You know, I think we want to say or do things, but there's really a lot of power in just sitting with someone and being quiet. And that's really hard to do, and can really help that person not feel alone. And I know we can't necessarily sit with someone, but if it's around a routine, maybe coming up with a routine that does work, like a new routine, reinventing that, and knowing that there's grief in your routine. Like you value that you got to go run every morning, and then go to your coffee shop and get your favorite drink, and then go, you know, by the bank and see whoever. And there is loss in these things because we are creatures of comfort. So I would say redefining something that feels good and comforting. I hope I answered that question somewhat. And the third one is, I've been using this as a journal writing prompt. See the fear, acknowledge it for what it is. Courage is fear walking. Wow. Instead of ignoring the emotions, name the emotions and define the function. How does it line up with your values? What do I want to do in the midst of this chaos? Yeah, I love that, Anna. So I'll read it again. So I have been using this as a journal writing prompt. See the fear, acknowledge it for what it is. So, you know, it's just like, yeah, I'm scared. This feels really scary. This feels really big. Courage is fear walking. So that to me just says, you know, like you put feet to your fear. It's like, even though you're feeling fear, you don't freeze. And that's courage. And then instead of ignoring the emotions, name them. I think naming them is important because it helps you feel like you have some control back. And since we all want that, I think that's really helpful. And define their function. That's really cool and interesting. And then what does it line up with your values? I think, you know, our values are being challenged here. Our values are challenged in life transitions, micro to macro. I mean, if anything's challenged, it's our mental health and it's our values. And then who do I want to be in the midst of this chaos? I love that, because I think that speaks to the, you know, 90% of it, we get to respond, and it gives you control of, I get to have a say here, right? I get to do, say, be, whatever. So how am I gonna, who do I want to be, you know? The choice to that. I am a therapist, and I would love for you to reach out to me for availability. I do have availability. Thank you. My husband passed away 2 years ago, but I have to self-isolate with health issues, throwing me back to about a year after he died. So lonely. Yes, I can only imagine how lonely you must be feeling right now. Feeling judged by my friends who all have spouses and children in the area. My daughter, only child, lives out of state. Yes, good grief, get over yourself is what you're feeling. And that's a judgment. Yeah, that's judgment. So I would challenge you to look at some self-compassion. And there's actually Kirsten, I can't think of her name right now, but she's out of UT, and she has a lot of things on self-compassion, both on YouTube and her website, if you Googled self-compassion and Kirsten. But yeah, I think also trying to drown out that noise, right? The judgments, whether it's you judging yourself or hearing it from the outside, and just accepting that you're really lonely and sad, and this is this is what you need right now. You need connection. You might want to join some type of a support group around grief. Maybe Karen knows of some as well. Hope that helps. Thanks so much. This has been very helpful for our current family situation. My adult son has a mental illness, which he will not accept. Very difficult. Super difficult. Yeah. I think the denial is really natural though. So loving him in that place could be really powerful to him eventually accepting it. Because I don't think, I like to use this example because I think we'll all face it if we haven't already, is that, I don't want my driver's license taken away when I can't drive anymore. And I'm going to be in denial about that. Right. And people are going to fight me on that. But someone who could love me through that and understand that and join me in my world of, I don't want to give up my independence, I like my freedom, is going to feel really softer and caring and loving to me than someone who, so I would just say it is really hard, and to try to love him through it as much as you could. Karen, I don't know how much time we have, just let me know. I have a 19-year-old heroin addict, and most people do heroin to numb emotion, but I do it to feel emotion. How do I feel emotion sober? That's a really great question. I think that's something we could talk about in therapy, because transitioning from not feeling to feeling, there's going to be this anxiety place because it's new. And so when things are new, humans get anxious, right? Because it's change. So that's a really, really that's a lot of powerful work that could be done there, Matthew. I don't want sympathy or pity. I don't want sympathy or pity. I want empathy. How do I ask for that without judgment? I think just like you told me what you wanted, that was very direct and clear. And, I love the definition, or the difference between sympathy and empathy is, I don't want someone to give me a pity party. Although I might want that. I might want some ice cream and some whatever pity party looks like for you. For me, it's ice cream. But I want someone to be with me in this, right? To the degree that we can. It's that walking in your shoes piece. It's like, what is it like to be this lonely? What is it like to be this depressed? What is that like? You want someone to be in it with you and join you in your reality. So I hope that maybe that language helped.
Rachel, we are at about a little just after noon.
Okay.
We tried to drop in some of the resources that you mentioned, as well as I just dropped in your website address as well for some of the folks that were interested in getting in touch with you.
Okay.
I want to make sure that, again, people are aware of visiting our website, NamiCentralTX.org. We've got some great resources listed there. Mm-hmm. And I think just from the experience we've been having in the last few weeks as we've done these weekly sessions, and from the calls and emails we're getting, I think more than anything, we want to encourage people to reach out and get help for themselves and for others during this time. There's a lot of folks like you, I know, who are doing teletherapy and who also know about other resources for support groups. I think one of the things you're touching upon is the fact that we are all sort of dealing with this collective grief and anxiety and stress right now, and how this is really going to be a marathon for all of us. There's a long haul ahead, and how important it is that we, again, reach out. Not only, I think it's interesting, I saw a lot of people asking questions about how to help other people in their lives, or that they're supporting other people. And I know we often are reminding people that, again, one of the best ways that you can help someone else is making sure you're taking good care of yourself also, and that you're getting the help that you need to navigate those challenging situations. So I feel like you gave us just a lot of great information and resources. Christina is going to take a look at your PowerPoint, and she's going to make sure that we share some of those suggestions that you made around some of the books and videos, because I thought those were really great resources. And so I just want to thank you for a really great session. I think you touched upon something that I think we've all been sensing and feeling, and gave us some great things to think about in terms of how to navigate all of that. And we appreciate you, and we're grateful for the time that you spent with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. I absolutely loved it, and I'm so appreciative to everyone who was a part of it.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a
Take
great
care.
day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.